Nicole Shapiro, welcome to the Creative Gap podcast. It's good to see you.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm stoked.
I think we met a couple years ago, and at this time, I think you were just producing a couple years ago. Is that right?
I actually started producing. I probably just started producing 2 years ago, but I have always been part of camera. Like, camera has been my bread and butter, and then kind of accidentally got into producing. I didn't really know what I was doing when I was doing it, and then I was like, oh, okay, this is producing, so I should start charging for that.
Right. I want to talk a little bit about your dual producing DP stuff a little bit later, but I'm just curious as to know your background a little bit. You're based in Toronto, right?
I'm based in Toronto, yeah. My background, I actually have a kinesiology degree. So I came from the
Kinesiology?
world of, yeah,
Oh, nice.
yeah. So I came from the world of sport and I guess sport media. And I transitioned into commercial pretty much after COVID and learned a lot of like DSLR stuff through weddings as well. I feel like everyone gets into weddings at the beginning,
Yeah.
so that was
For
kind
a
of
little bit at least. Unless you get
for a little
stuck in
bit.
weddings. I know a few people that like truly love weddings, and I give it to them.
Yeah. And I mean, if it works, it works. But for me, like,
Right.
as soon as COVID hit, I had one wedding that was like a COVID wedding that I captured, and I was like, I'm never doing this again because all your guests have masks. You can't see smiles. Like, just postpone it. Like, so I lost, as well as everyone else, we lost a lot of money if you were ever in weddings during that time. So then that was the year I pivoted away from weddings and got more into like commercial stuff and music videos. So yeah.
Very cool. When did you start like holding a camera? When was the first time you realized that this was something that you maybe thought of as a hobby, but then you thought of it as an actual profession or the possibility of a profession?
I think the wedding stuff was like the kind of spark in my mind of, okay, I don't know if anyone else has this like list or this like note in their phone of like, if I shoot this many weddings times this amount in a summer, like this is the amount I'm gonna make, and minus taxes and stuff. I remember my aunt, I shot her daughter's wedding, so my cousin, and obviously she was biased, but Aunt Arlene was like, you can like make a lot of money doing this, right? And I was like, interesting. Like, I'm in my 4th year, graduating from kin, and here I am thinking I'm going to be like a strength and conditioning coach and I was going to go to Ohio and do my master's. Like, I had a whole plan. And then the summer after I graduated, I actually did 2 internships, and that was my deciding factor. I did like a strength and conditioning internship, and then I did the like wedding videography internship. And in both scenarios, I was always thinking of the angles of like, oh, they need an ad for this, or like they they should be promoting their gym this way. And I was like not even focusing on the workouts at that point. So yeah, that was kind of the deciding factor in terms of like it being a sustainable career, because there is always that starving artist mentality, but as an independent filmmaker, I just feel like there's so much opportunity. And Toronto is like such a growing city that I feel like this wave of popularity for video, I kind of like I'm in that right now, started when video was becoming popular, and now that it is popular, I have systems in place that make it really easy for either people to find me or for, just productions in general to run. So it was kind of a good time to like get into it, but yeah.
Yeah, I was going to ask if you had any interest in ever wanting to move to like a bigger city like LA or New York, or has Toronto been kind of like, have you find a lot of benefit in it being a growing city that you're kind of growing with it? Like, people have asked me why I don't live in LA, because I have the mentality of I'd rather be like a big fish in a small pond and grow that way. I don't know if you have a similar mentality as well.
That's the exact same way I feel, actually. There's 2 ways you could do it, right? You could go to LA and actually be a starving artist and be a very, very, very small fish in a ginormous pond and miraculously meet the right people and get in that way, or yeah, you could be a bigger fish in a smaller pond, which is what I feel. And the pond is only getting bigger, so for me it makes sense to stay here until I feel like, I've hit my ceiling. But
Mm,
I don't see the ceiling anywhere close to me right now. I have so much work to do. I have so much, like, so many connections to still be made, and like understanding of the dynamics in the city and things like that. There's a lot of production houses already. There's tons of, agencies and reps that
yeah.
like I have yet to meet. So it's still super new and big for me. And yeah, until I reach a ceiling, great. But it's funny.
Right.
I literally just had a conversation with someone, Justin Abernathy. He's a director here, and he just got his U.S. visa. So him and I were chatting of like, what does that look like? Do you, rent a place in Toronto for way too much money and then
Sure.
travel to the US and spend more money there and go back and forth, like based on your opportunities. So it's like a weird, it's all, especially being Canadian, it's always a thought of like the US
Right.
has projects that have more money behind it, and
Mm,
that's kind of where the attraction lies, no matter where, like New York, LA, but anywhere really in the States has
yeah.
usually more money behind production, which is why it's
Interesting.
enticing for us. But
Do you
yeah.
have any people like within the Toronto area, or I don't really know the areas of Canada too well, but that you kind of look up to as in terms of like inspiration, like, oh, there's still like this person is at this level doing such great work in Toronto or in Canada. There's no reason for me to like move. Are there people like that you gain inspiration from?
Um, there's a mix. Like right now, I'm in this weird, interesting phase where I have these like multiple buckets where I'm kind
Mm.
of dipping my feet in, like, I don't want to say the influencer world, but it's kind of like
Yeah,
the
you're starting to get
online
there a little bit.
educators,
Yeah.
of filmmaking. That's what I like to call it more so.
Right.
Um, but yeah, there's
Influencer's a
like,
weird word.
yeah, I just want to educate and
Right.
like, you know, be the face of it. Um, but yeah, I think the that world. Obviously, I look up to Lizzie a ton. I met Lizzie like
Hmm.
2 years ago, and I just from hanging out with her and stuff. We actually met through TikTok, which is insane. Like that's
That's
another
fun.
avenue of just crazy meeting people. She travels all over the place, so she's not exactly like a work in Toronto only kind of girl, but Toronto's her home base. So that was like a huge source of inspiration of like that Toronto can still be your home base and you can travel and do things in different spots to, just make a name for yourself. You don't have to fully like pick up and move your whole world somewhere else.
Right.
But yeah, she's been a huge source of inspiration. And it's funny because from her side of things, this is maybe like a little tangent, but like because she lives more in the influencer space and I live more in the filmmaking world, she then also takes inspiration from me because she's like, I just want to
Mm,
be on set more. So like,
right.
let's do stuff together. And I'm like, well, okay, I want to be more in the YouTube world, or at least just see like
Mm,
what that is. So we kind of work really well together in that sense of like, let's go on set and I'll bring you on to like direct or produce or something, and I can shoot it, and you can bring on Justin, like her videographer, and do your behind the scenes explainer of like what we're doing today and things like that, and vice
that's
versa, where I
awesome.
get to see what those brands want and what that looks like on her end. So
Mm,
yeah, that's been like a big inspiration for me because especially in those slow months with film, as like no, what I mean for this year, my slow month was no. It started November. I was like, whoa,
right.
this is coming early. So it's the December, January, February kind of slow ebb and
Right.
flow month that we all go through. But with YouTube and the influencing stuff, it doesn't really stop. So it's
Yeah.
like it's
It's good to
very.
diversify. It seems like you're trying to diversify your world a little bit more.
Yeah, 100%. I think the diversification started I mean, it just happened yesterday when Instagram went down, but there was like a really big Instagram outage. I don't know if it happened in
Mm.
the States, but it happened
I didn't
in
even
I guess
realize.
Toronto. Oh yeah. It was
Mm-mm.
maybe 6 hours like yesterday. Maybe it
That's
was
a pretty
less.
substantial amount of time.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I that happened like years ago. I remember there was like a bigger outage, and I thought to myself, okay, I need to start not just having Instagram as the place where people come and find me and hire me and
Hmm.
stuff. I need to diversify. So that's when I was doing the TikTok thing, and then this year it's like both the TikTok and the YouTube thing. So I'm trying to just get in all the pockets so that I can, not be reliant on like one single platform because that can get really scary. Like if Instagram just
Right.
decides to evaporate one day, there goes a lot of my work. So
Sure.
it's
Yeah, no,
I
I
don't
feel
want
that.
that to be like a downfall. So yeah.
Yeah, I always wonder that because Instagram, I use it as kind of just like my portfolio. I don't post any personal things at all. It's like my business page. That's what you look at for my work.
Hmm.
And then I don't do a TikTok, but I do YouTube. But I always wonder like how much YouTube actually influences people to hire me as a DP.
Mm.
And I've seen over the past year or so, the behind the scenes stuff that I've done has been really beneficial for people to see how I work as a DP on set. Like having a
Yep.
microphone, you get to hear how you communicate with people. Because, a lot of people can make a good looking image. It's not, I don't want to say it's not hard, but it's easier to do that than to actually be a good DP in terms of communication, leadership, all those different attributes.
Totally.
So, I have definitely seen a benefit. I was telling you earlier, the film I'm doing next month, the person found me through the podcast, actually, but that was just another way of someone hiring me because she liked the way that I communicated things and the way I spoke.
Yeah.
So I think it's really great what you're doing and diversifying. And I'm curious as to like how you find the balance between the two. Because for me, it's difficult and it takes a lot of like mental energy to DP something while also focusing on behind the scenes and then editing that. And it could be a lot sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't done it for that long, so
Yeah.
I'm not
And I'm
really.
curious, just like the beginning stages, like how are you feeling so far about it?
So far it's been okay, but like I definitely can see it being like a ton of work. So the recent spec we just did with Bumble, that was
Hmm.
so much fun, by the way. But when we didn't really plan on doing like three behind the scene parts to it. Um, we took tons of inspiration from you actually on your behind the scenes. It's like less edited, and I'm like, oh, that's
Hmm.
great because in my
It's
mind,
kind
I'm
of
like, I
raw. I
have
just
less
think of it as like
editing.
raw
Yeah, it's
behind the
more
scenes. That's kind of
raw,
the way I
like,
think of it. Yeah.
yeah, like fly on the wall, like what's
Hmm.
happening, take the time to actually absorb it. I really love that style. And I mean, it's also great because there's less cutting to do. So
Yeah.
it's like a win-win. Um, so yeah, that behind the scenes, we took inspiration from that of like doing a little bit of like, less cuts. And then the lighting breakdown, like Wandering DP does like a phenomenal job
Yeah,
of that. So
phenomenal.
I'm just like that's where that inspiration came from. And then the overall production breakdown. So there were three parts to that. So
Hmm.
Sydney, the director, she actually edited the behind the scenes one and just chopped up like all the B-roll and all the A-roll and tried to, piece together kind of a story with it. So that was super helpful. I just went in and like added text and added like an intro and things like that. So that was like super helpful. But the other two I edited and it's kind of fun, but I feel like
Yeah,
I'm
I
gonna
watched it. I watched it this morning. It's great. I
yeah,
think you're
thank
doing a
you.
great job. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I know I say that it's fun now, but I know that
Yeah.
it's a grind, like it's a marathon, so I have to just, be conscious of the, I guess, amount of effort I'm expending, with it to just pace myself because I know I can be
Right.
like, yeah, this one spec, let's do 3 videos, and then the next one I'm like, oh damn, this is a
Yeah.
lot. So,
Yeah. I think I
yeah,
remember I did a commercial or three commercials in a row, and all of them had behind the scenes. And then by the end
nice.
of it, I had three behind the scenes that I had to edit, and I think I crashed. I couldn't do it. It was too much.
Yep.
It took me like 3 months to actually get around to one of them.
Yep.
But yeah, it could be overwhelming at a time. But that Bumble project was something I wanted to talk about. I think was really well done. And I'm
Thank
curious
you.
because for something that I did, I think similarly to you, is I don't think I labeled myself as a producer, but in the beginning, before I was getting like, bigger DP work for a lot of the spec stuff, I was creating the projects myself, producing it, but also DPing it. What does that relationship look like for you, EPing and DPing simultaneously?
It's so much work. Like, oh. This time around, we actually did get like a production manager. So she did a
Mm,
lot of the like call sheets. Well, our AD did the call sheet, but there were so many parts that we could delegate. And we were like, oh, thank goodness. Like, I don't have to worry about asking the crew about dietary restrictions and food and all these like
yeah, the simple,
logistical things that
yeah,
are like, I've got one brain cell and that's dedicated to creative. Like,
right.
so I think the EP side of things, and I'll actually bring up another project that we did like a couple months back. I think we shot in November and it came out around January. It was for Jaja Tequila. It's
Hmm.
like half owned by, I didn't know this at the time, but it's half owned by the Chainsmokers and then half owned
Oh, that's
by
fun.
Fuck Jerry, the like meme account.
Okay. Yeah, that's
So
interesting.
random. So anyway, we just like the bottle of it, but in that project, it was really important for me and the director. We actually co-DP'd on that. So there was like three parties involved. And
Mm,
EPing in that sense, especially on a spec, is truly, in at least in my perspective, it's truly about creative control. So like if you're investing financially, you have to be aware that other people are investing as well, their own money,
right.
and they have to have equal creative control. So like all of the EPs slash like co-DPs and directors should be CC'd on everything. Like we should have eyes
Mm,
on everything, the edit, the color, like the rollout, all of this
absolutely. Yeah.
stuff. So it was, and typically, like as a DP, if you're hired for a job, you're not concerned about any of that. Oh, we have a visitor.
Oh, hello. What was his
Hello,
name again?
Sebastian.
Sebastian.
The camera's over here.
For
Say
those that are
hi.
just listening, Sebastian is a cat.
Yep. Makes a little appearance. Thank you for that.
No, that's great. I think having that balance it's definitely a challenge, but having that creative control. And for me, I found
Yeah.
that producing is oddly satisfying. Like I really
Mm,
love the conception of a project and seeing it all the way through. And being a DP, you're obviously solving a ton of problems regularly,
yeah.
mostly on the creative side and sometimes, on the logistics side. But as a producer, you're dealing with every problem that comes your way every in every department, regardless. So
Yep.
seeing it all the way through has been like really satisfying.
Yeah,
Are you
definitely.
good with numbers?
I hated math actually. In
Mm,
school, I was like, absolutely not. Like I had this mental block of no, I don't like numbers at all. But in a production, it's like it's more about like ratios, if anything, of like
right.
what department gets this and like, it's more of like a managing numbers versus
Yeah,
like calculations and things like
sure.
that. Excel can do that for us. So
Hmm.
um yeah, I the number side is in terms of like, yeah, budgeting, it's definitely satisfying when you're like you actually, you meet your mark and you're like, "Oh, we actually did
Yeah.
it for this amount." Like it's very satisfying. Um but I think the EP side, I guess like the fun part about it is like you said, just seeing it through from the very
Mm,
beginning and like getting your team and your leads and like making sure the environment is good on set. Like I'm such a big advocate for like just good vibes.
good
Like
vibes.
especially
That's
on a
right.
spec. Like just
Yeah,
just everyone is having a good time and I don't know, like I think it's EPs usually, on bigger sets, like sometimes they're not even on a set. So like
right.
for both of us to be that, higher level person that kind of conceptualize it all and to like see it happen and, just have everyone be involved and excited about the project. It's like so fulfilling. So, yeah,
Yeah.
but I'm excited to not do that for,
Mm.
all the projects. Like, do you usually hire production managers and producers that are under you?
For the ones that I produce, I'm trying to think of. So I did two last year that I'm thinking of in particular, and one of them I did not hire a production manager, so I dealt with all of the producing roles. It was just me, but
Damn.
I also brought on a director that was not a producer, so that was a
Mhm.
weird relation. Not weird because we work great together and we have a great relationship. So I was producer and DP, and there was a director in between those two roles. So like that's very interesting to deal with. And then the
Yep.
other project, I brought on another producer, project manager, who I've worked with on a ton of commercials, and she is phenomenal and took so much weight off my chest, I guess.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
But
Yeah, it's
I've
in
also,
this case, sorry, in this
no, no,
case with
you're
the
good.
Bumble thing, Sydney is also quite good at producing. Like she produces
Mm,
her own stuff too.
that's
So I
great.
didn't have to like, handhold or explain like, oh, this is how we do things or like this is, the usual flow of like she just knew. And it's so helpful when you work with, like another
Right.
EP in that sense that if the director you were working with, was he financially contributing too?
No.
Oh,
Mm-mm.
okay. So then, I mean, you would have more creative control if anything,
Yeah,
but
and I think that was the interesting part was like technically I have the creative control, but I brought him on for a specific reason that I had this idea, but I'm not a director. I don't want to be a director. So I brought
right.
him on because I love his ideas and I love what he could bring to the table. So like I almost had to like let go of the ego side of, oh, I'm the EP, I have creative control, and just be like, I brought this person on for a reason. Let me trust what he wants to do.
Sweet. Yeah. Yeah. Trust
Which
is
can be a hard thing
huge.
to do.
That's a
Yeah.
very,
Trust is
very,
huge.
yeah. Yeah. I like respect that a lot because the moment that someone's, just runs with it and they're like, no, this is my way or the highway, it's like, oh, the vibes just
Right.
get killed.
Yeah, for sure.
So, yeah.
That Bumble project, I want to switch to DPing a little bit. I'm curious as
Mhm.
to, besides EPing, just from the cinematography perspective, what challenges you faced making that project?
Um, I remember feeling the most friction or like the most nerves when it came to lighting. And even though we did
Mm,
all the prep and everything, I was still like, I just, there's some moments where you have the lighting plan, you do it, and you're like, no, no, there's something not
yeah,
right here. So I had a really good gaffer though. So I was like, I again delegated that and really trusted him of like, how do we make this look like my reference images? So
sure, sure.
um, the one thing that really helped was on my iPad just drawing, like if the source is coming from here, these are where my shadows are going to be. I need it to be softer. Do we have more diffusion we can use? And just lots of all of those little questions. And the fact that the gear that we were using was Andre's, our gaffer.
Mm,
So, and with a spec, like you're trying to conserve as much money as
sure.
possible. And so there were definitely times where I was like, oh, I wish I could have had some more lights to either light the exterior or like had more MCs to like give more pops somewhere, like just small
Yeah,
little things. But sometimes it just comes down to budget where you're like, oh, like
right.
it's not gonna break the image, but it would be nice. But it
Of course.
yeah,
Yeah, of course.
there's always something of it would be
Mm.
nice to have more, but
I'm
yeah,
curious. I want to dig a little deeper into like your lighting plans. So, were your lighting, did you design them maybe on like after a scout that you've done? Like, what
yeah.
about your lighting plans did not align to it being, how you envisioned in production when you were actually shooting?
Um, the one thing that we, I guess, like didn't use was we had the F-22, and I
Okay.
basically
It's a
have
great
like
light.
I love it. It's like so so versatile and so light. Like you can just throw it
Hmm.
anywhere. One of my friends, Will Binks, he says it's like
Lil
Frank's hot
Banks.
sauce. Binks,
So Banks.
Binks.
Oh, I thought you
He
said
was
Lil Banks, like his name's like a rapper name, Lil
oh
Banks. That's
no, Will
oh,
Banks,
Will Banks,
Like William, yeah,
not Lil Banks.
Will Banks.
Yeah,
Imagine. Oh, you would
that's
never
funny.
live that down on a set. Um,
Right.
he always makes a joke about that light of calling it Frank's Red, like Frank's Red hot
Mm,
sauce, because you just put that shit on everything. Like you F-22
right.
here, F-22 here. Like yeah, it's such a great light. But we also had the Falcon Eyes, which is like basically the same thing, just
Mm,
bicolor and from a different
mm,
company. So what we didn't use was that, and I don't know if that would have made like a. I'm glad that we didn't use it, and that's something that we wrote out in the prep of like making sure we had a lot of wrap and like instead of
mm,
having it, really shadowy. But then I think maybe it was like a style that came out where I'm thinking, wait, no, I want it to look more shadowy. So let's just do the F-22 and not the Falcon Eyes.
mm.
So it was actually about creating more like shadow
More
than
contrast.
yeah, more contrast. And yeah,
Mm,
that's I think where the plan didn't like actually translate to what we wanted, but
sure.
I'm still so new to that. Like learning about lighting is one thing on YouTube, but actually doing it and
For sure.
executing, it's
Yeah.
like you learn obviously so much more on a set. And like I guess for those watching, if you want to learn about lighting, get a light in your hand and see what it does in a room. Like just point
Right.
it at something, then point it through something, then bounce it and see what happens, because when you actually see it, then you can make those mental notes of, oh, okay, if I bounce it, then it becomes softer, but there's less contrast. Like there's just so many things you can make mental notes on when you actually do it. Because with the Wandering DP, like he's awesome. I can
Yeah. He's
understand
like,
what
oh
he's
yeah,
saying.
this light here, doing this, that thing.
It's like,
It's so
wow, like
simple.
he's just simple. Yeah.
Yeah.
He just dissects it so well. Um, but then each space that you walk into is going to be so different. So like
Hmm.
you're going to have to be like you're going to have to be versed in what specific lights do and which scenarios you're going to use those in, because like perfect
Sure.
example, this Bumble thing, the um the living room? No, it was the kitchen was technically there was only two locations. It was the kitchen and then the living room. And the kitchen had a ton of windows, but it was an evening spot. So we were like, either we black out all of these windows and it's going to take way too much time, or we just start with the living room because there's only two
Hmm.
windows there and black those out first. Just like, certain things like that where initially I would have liked to shoot the kitchen first, but like it just, certain things like that where you're like
Yeah.
this room is not going to look the exact same as any other thing that the Wandering DP has broken down, like every
Right.
space is going to be so different with external factors and all this stuff. So yeah, it's
Right.
you got to
I think
be
that's like,
flexible.
I think that's an interesting point you bring up because I think for me, I struggled really. Lighting was the one thing I could never grasp in the beginning. It was the hardest thing for me to understand until I realized that I was like my thinking process in lighting was trying to be too complex when I really didn't have a great foundation on the fundamentals of lighting first.
Mm,
So understanding the fundamentals and really dialing those in to be able to, I say, a lot of the DP work that I've done over the past 3 years, like stuff that I'll never show, is like a lot of interviews. And interviews for me, people could think are this like mundane, DP work that, no creative freedom, it's just boring. I don't want to do them anymore. But I love interviews because it literally tests your fundamentals to the maximum. Because you could shoot a
yep.
basic interview, or you could walk into a room that 9 times out of 10 you've never seen before, and you have to make it look good, make it look the best you can. And by practicing those fundamentals, by lighting a face, because that's what an interview is. You're lighting a face, but you're also lighting the space behind the person as well.
Yep.
You start to understand what things do, what type, the quality of light looks like. And once I understood that, as long as I can dial in the fundamentals first, and, when I'm in a new space that I'm struggling to figure out how to light, figure out where is the camera going to be? What am I facing? And then just look at that frame first. Like, sometimes I get overwhelmed of looking at the entire world that I'm like in real life. But in reality, I only need to light what's in between that frame.
Yeah.
So sometimes simplifying your approach and then building upon that has helped me find more confidence in my ability to light. So
that's a great point. And with it, I mean, it's the most recent thing that I've done. I keep bringing up the Bumble thing, but there were so many scenes.
I'm glad you do, because it's great, and I'm going to share it when this comes out, because I think it's something you should be very proud of, for sure.
Thank you. Yeah, like with that, there were so many different shots in the same room. So I was like, in order to save time, I was actually the reverse of that, where I was like, I have to light this whole space. And that's probably where I was like, oh no, like freaking out. Cause I'm like, if I have to face, if the camera is seeing all like a full 180 here, then all my lights have to just be either on this side of the room or boomed overhead somehow so that we can't see it, or, that was difficult for sure. But I guess those are just two approaches of either you light for the room, depending on how flexible and floaty the camera has to be. But then that's also our decision of do we want a bunch of wides? Because if we do, that's going to complicate a lot of our lighting.
Oh, yeah, it's brutal.
Yeah,
it's brutal.
Like the one, I think it was the headphone commercial with Danny.
Bose?
Yeah, the Bose one. That one you mentioned, or maybe Danny mentioned it. I can't remember which video it was, but you guys talked about getting more mediums, because then your world is smaller. There's less lights that you have to throw around. By the way, I am ordering a white pool noodle very soon because of you. You have to have an Amazon link to those.
I do. I sold a lot of them.
Do you?
I sold. I made a lot
awesome.
I made a lot of money on my Amazon affiliate from those white pool noodles.
That's
but
hilarious.
I've also got people there's been people that comment on a YouTube video or message me being mad at me because it's not available in their country. I'm like, how is that my fault? How is that my problem? I'm sorry.
Go talk to your pool noodle friends and make them available in my country.
No, but the pool noodles are great. Like, they're so cheap, but the one thing they do, you lose level, in the light, but in terms of softness, it's a freaking amazing tool.
Yeah, I'm so excited to get mine. I'm super sold on it, because
I use it all the time.
That would have, I think, helped the Bumble thing, because if we wanted to be even more flexible than the F-22, we could have just Hollywood that anywhere and you're good.
Oh, yeah.
It's insane.
The problem with the tubes is they're soft, but you go through a layer of plastic, and that layer of plastic for me isn't as soft as it doesn't feel as organic as the pool noodle. And the pool noodle spreads that light, because the tube light is only this thick.
Yep.
But when you have a noodle, it spreads throughout the whole entire thing, and it becomes a bigger source, and that's what makes it softer.
Yep.
So it's
I'm so excited.
a phenomenal tool. Yeah, it's. I saw that for the first time on an A24 set. Her name was Ava Burkowski. She is an ASC DP. Freaking killer. Yeah. And I saw these pool noodles just laying around. I'm like, oh, this is brilliant. It's not something I invented. It's something that big time people use for years. Yeah. And it just wasn't, it's one of those gatekeeping things that nobody ever shared. Yeah. And I think I just shared it with people, and it kind of, went a little wild. But
you're the pool noodle guy.
I am the pool. I should have started my own pool noodle business before I promoted it, and just sold 100%. My own pool noodle brand, and then tripled the price because it's a film pool noodle. Yeah.
I
Oh
think that would have
man.
been genius.
Um,
Yeah.
but I'm curious. I've seen you in a couple posts also like camera operating and ACing. How much other crew work are you doing besides DP stuff?
Yeah, so it's I'm glad you asked because that was I guess this summer is when I was like second ACing a little bit just to like figure out what it's like to be a smaller piece to a bigger
Right.
puzzle. And I mean it's been a very recent journey for me understanding the hierarchy of film because I come from the sport media videography side and then accidentally started producing and I was like, "Oh, okay, I was producing that, but I shot it." So does that make me a cinematographer? And then the whole transition between what the heck is a cinematographer versus videographer and like why
Right.
are people so offended? And there's just all this stuff, right, that comes with
Yeah.
that transition. So in order for me to feel like I could say that like with my chest and
Mm,
confidently, I was like, I just want to be a very small puzzle piece on bigger sets and understand how other people are lighting things, understand like what I need to ask from my team when I'm shooting,
sure.
and like what I need
Yeah,
to
it's
look
great.
for, like sense
Hmm.
of urgency, organization,
Hmm.
having the gear yourself, like owning certain things actually does help sometimes. So yeah, I think I was second ACing for a little bit and then I first AC'd. It's just, on very indie independent films that are like very low pressure, lots of
Sure.
time to learn, which was really nice. Max Mezzo was the DP for something this summer. It was like a bunch of short, funny commercials, and he was working with a
Hmm.
director that wanted to do more comedy stuff. And so that was like a really cool learning opportunity for me. And Max is like 21 and
Nice.
he just graduated from film school like a couple of years ago and I'm like I don't care that I'm
Right.
6 years older or whatever. I can let me just like be in this environment and see what they
Hmm.
do and it like I totally learned a lot. So translating that information back into like DPing and understanding especially the lighting too, like just being there and seeing things happen in the flow that like significantly helps my process too. So yeah, it's using that to then further my cinematography side of things
Sure.
just like everything else I think like be trying to be on different sets is one thing and then with the whole filmmaking education side like the YouTube or the TikTok using that as well to get brands on board to then maybe I have new lights and I'm like, oh great, I can use that to benefit my cinematography.
Right.
Like I'm trying to loop it all so that I can just grow this creative side. But yeah, just the more that you know within camera, and that's all I've really done. I haven't done any gaffing or any other
Mm,
departments. It's solely just been camera. But the more you know, even if it's just a little bit of how things work, what people need when you're in that position, it's so much easier to be a leader because you're like,
100%.
I know exactly what you need, especially being a producer. Like you probably know all about that, where you're like, as a DP, I know that if this project is 10 grand, this is probably going to be my camera package. It's not going to be the Alexa Mini with cooks. Like, no,
Sure.
you're going to shoot on an FX3 and it's going to be
Right.
a favor. Like your ideas of budgeting, your ideas of like timeline, that all helps being a DP or being a producer and then taking that information back to being a DP. It's like it's so underrated. So,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. I've always said that I haven't done, coming up an insane amount of crewing. I kind of went a different route where I just decided that I was a DP and just became one and just
Nice.
did
Yep.
my best to do that. But I did crew to a degree. I think enough for me to understand that I am not made for any of those positions at
Yep.
all. Because ACing for me, I did it a couple times, and I can't do it. I'm not good at all.
Yeah. What
But
was
it
your
makes you
challenge?
I just wanted to be shooting. I just
Yeah.
hated,
You just wanted
to
to
be
frame
honest,
it
it was,
and
I just wanted, like, I knew immediately what I want my role in this industry was. Once I realized what a DP was,
yeah.
that's all I cared about. And,
Yep.
obviously you're not doing that immediately. So, when you're ACing, I don't think it was technically that difficult for me. Granted, I wasn't doing the most extreme stuff. It was a pretty simplistic project.
Yeah.
But all I cared about was like, I wish I could be deciding what lights we're using and why we're shooting it. Like, that's what I really loved. And I think
Yep.
I then made a unique transition to stop crewing as much and DP and PA simultaneously, which is a very rare thing. And I don't think a lot of people do it. But while I was DPing smaller project and growing within my market, I was also simultaneously PAing on projects. And for me, that didn't put me necessarily in a box in terms of like what department I'm so focused on, but it gave me a better overall view of the entire project and the entire scope of the project.
Totally.
I don't know if that's a good thing, bad thing. It helped me for a while until I, stopped PAing. But I think being able to see different positions and see the film set in a different point of view does help you as a leader, which is something that is super important in being a DP is your leadership skills.
Did you ever think about union stuff? Like, what kind of unions do you
I've
guys have where you are?
We have like Local 600, which is the camera union. We have what is the G&E union? I forget what it is. But I've considered going union. I don't think I'm there yet in terms of my skill and my career as a DP. I think eventually, given my inspirations of what I want to be shooting, I think I'll inevitably have to go union at some point as a
Yeah.
DP. I just don't think right now I'm getting enough work as a non-union DP. I'm making a good living and I'm doing some great projects. I still don't have an agent yet either, which is like, I think the next step for me is trying to find
Right.
an agent. So I don't
Yeah.
know what the unions are like in Canada. Are
Yeah, we have
they
a
hard to get into?
it's yes. It's very competitive from what I have heard. I also it takes it's it takes a long time to get to
Right.
the DP, role. Like people that are DPs in the union are like above 60.
Yeah.
Like you're in it for a while and um if I was even interested in getting into the union, I would start as a camera trainee and then you would move up to a
Hmm.
second as if you have a certain amount of hours. And then, like, being a camera trainee teaches you how to be a second, but it definitely doesn't teach you how to be a first.
Right.
So if you were a second in the union, from what I've heard, like, this isn't like firsthand experience, but you would need to first AC on indie stuff or on things,
Mm,
to learn the skill and then apply to upgrade once again you have a certain amount of hours. Same for operating. Like
right.
you just need to work a ton of indie things to like account for hours and yeah, in order to move up. But it's such a mixed review. Like so many people
Yeah, I feel the
I
same way.
because we're independent and we kind of came from the work with your friends and good vibes on
Yeah.
set kind of like
It's a whole
mindset. You
different
go,
world, union sets. I've
it's a
I've seen a
whole different
couple of
world.
them. It's a whole different world. Yeah, I
Yeah.
did. I was saying the A24 thing where I saw the pool noodle. I don't know how I got connected with A24, but I shot a couple behind the scenes documentaries for 2 films that A24 created, and I got to like that was the best like college experience I could have gotten. Like that
Totally.
trumps film school to me. I would come on set, not beholden to any department. I had my own camera and I'm just observing everything that's going on and filming it. It was amazing, but
That's
it's just
amazing.
crazy to see how union sets work and like how each person has their specific role and nobody does anything else. And like, I see the benefit. I also am so not used to that very
Yeah.
much.
Yep. I it, I wish that I could experience that same thing just to like
Mm,
know for myself if I would want to be on those sets or not. And I don't know about you, like are you big into movies? Like you're a big movie watcher?
I wouldn't say that I'm like a movie buff. I also came into this industry so late. Like I was an athlete my whole life, never was an artist, creative until I was about 19 or 20, and I'm
Yeah.
25 right now. So like I came super late.
Yep.
So I have conversations with people and they're talking about movies that inspired them from the 1930s. And I'm like, I can't even relate. Like I'm not that deep. And I don't know if that's like a fault. I don't know if I should be, but
Yeah.
like, granted, I do love movies and, shooting the feature that I did catch like a bug of wanting to shoot more features.
Yep.
But I'm definitely not like a film nerd by any
Yep.
stretch, not even
Yep.
close.
I completely relate. Like I had people are like, "Have you watched Kill Bill?" I'm like, sorry, no. I
Yeah,
know what it is. I know that there's like swords and stuff. That's about it. Like,
right.
but I definitely have like a watch list of movies I should probably know, like as
Yeah,
someone in the
I do too.
industry.
Yeah.
But I never came into it the same way. Like, athlete sport world, I'm thinking my brain is more at this point in my career, I'm more thinking commercial. And
Right.
eventually maybe I will similarly catch that bug. I actually did shoot a short narrative this past summer. I have no idea when it's gonna come out. I've seen it already, like it's done color and stuff, and it was such a good experience because
Mm.
it showed me like it sh- it really revealed how much I still have to learn because when you shoot
Mm.
narrative, you have to
Yeah.
light it in a realistic way, whereas commercial, you
Sure.
can do all kinds of funky, cool tricks to like make
Right.
it high key, make it look flashy and fake and beautiful and all this stuff. But like, yeah, when you're shooting a living room scene at night, make it look real and make it
Yeah.
not look like you lit it. And so it's a totally different
Yeah. For
approach I
sure.
found, at least with narrative. So that's the only real reason why I ask is like that transition from if you want to go into that union world, like the movie side of things is usually where people gravitate to because you're doing
Hmm.
more shows or narrative and things like that versus the independent side of things where that I tend to find, at least in Toronto, that's where the more commercially music video
Mm.
kind of stuff lives. So yeah, it's totally different worlds though.
Yeah,
But
it's two different muscles you have to work as a DP. And I've talked about this before. Like when I was shooting the feature, there was one scene in particular that like really got to me, and it was like at a dinner table, and dinner table scenes are like top lit because there's usually like a chandelier or something.
yep.
And I remember looking at the image, and I'm like, it fits for what I'm doing, but like I'm leaving raccoon eyes. I'm leaving the fact that there really isn't an eye light that I would normally do. I would normally clean this up if it was a
Yeah.
commercial, but
Yep.
because of the story and the character, I left it. But it was such a moment of realization for me of like a different muscle, and like I had to train myself to be like, it's not supposed to be polished like a commercial.
Yep. Totally.
It Yeah, it's tough, but the other
It's like
thing
a
about
different checklist,
narrative,
I guess.
100%.
Yeah.
And you also have to make the look consistent for an hour and a
Yep.
half opposed to 30
Yep.
seconds. That's
Oh my
also a
God.
huge challenge.
Huge. Yep. That was a big thing that we faced too when you're switching between different dialogue and you're also not definitely not shooting anything in order. So you got
Right.
to make a mental note of, okay, this was our lighting setup from when we shot this one scene. So we got to move these lights back to where they were. And then if you don't do that, it is super challenging, and I'm super grateful that I did it, and it like really opened my eyes to totally different checklist, like brand new. And granted, I
Hmm.
was the last one to get hired almost, like they had, which is super
Oh,
rare, like
interesting.
as the DP. So it
Yeah, for
was
real.
like director, AD, producer, even the gaffer, like at art, it was like all in place, and then it was like
Mm.
me. And I was like, okay, cool. And it was also a team of pretty much all guys. And I was just coming in like, why me? But okay,
Right.
sure. Like I'm down to still do it and try. And I'm super glad that I did. But yeah, it's a very different process than what I'm used to.
I noticed on the Bumble behind the scenes that the crew was like predominantly female. Is that
Yeah.
something that you find that you want to introduce more? Are you finding that, women are becoming more interested in your area in filmmaking?
Yeah. I'll throw it back to like the sport days where, because I think this is like a crucial part to why I am, happy to be in in this industry where like in camera there's not a lot of girls. Um, do you know Cassie Athena?
Cassie Athena.
She's a
Mm-mm.
photographer and she's an NBA photographer, and I used to shoot basketball. Like that's where my like the very first kind of things that I was shooting were like basketball highlight tapes and stuff. And I remember seeing her and I was like, "Oh shoot, she's like this blonde girl shooting NBA players that are like 7 feet." And
Right.
I don't know if she's like super tall, but I just obviously she's not a guy. So I was like, "That's really cool. Like if she can do it, I can do it too," kind of thing.
Mm.
And I think it's when it came to the filmmaking side of things, similar kind of worlds, especially as strength and conditioning, because I'm coming in as this like 5'4" little girl being
Listen,
like,
I'm not a girl, but I'm 5'4" as well. So I
yeah,
relate on the height side of things.
on the height side, totally. Yeah, when you're at least with the strength and conditioning stuff, it was like, football teams coming in at like 6 in the morning, and I'm telling them, yeah, okay, dumbbell press here, and then it's like whatever. I'm just leading them through a workout, but it's like, what the heck does she know? So it's
Right.
it's like that confidence was built like way back then of like it really doesn't matter the fact that I am a girl in this industry. Like it's if anything, it's helped me because I'm sometimes more recognizable. It's like, oh yeah, the girl that was there, like because
I
it's
see.
such
Yeah,
a
yeah, yeah.
random, like thing to think about. But um, yeah, I think going back to the Bumble crew stuff, that was completely not conscious. Like it was also like a Galentine's Day commercial, so like it was
Okay.
surrounded around, girlfriends hanging out for dinner and stuff. So the concept, I think, like kind of
It like
generally we were
led
like,
into
oh,
that. Yeah.
yeah, it led into that, but it wasn't like top of mind that like, oh, we need a
Sure,
predominantly
sure.
female crew. I think it's like important for it to be not. It shouldn't be like the very top of mind. Like your set should be top of mind when hiring for
I
sure.
agree. Hmm.
Um, but yeah, there's like a interesting like balance. I wouldn't even say balance. It just has to be something that people maybe should think about a little bit. Just a little bit like I'm not asking for the whole thing, but just like think of it just a little bit because when I saw Cassie Athena shooting, I was like, "Oh shit, like she can do it, I can do it too." And so when
Hmm.
you have the visibility and the optics where like the first person that I saw that had like an easy rig was this girl Christina Iena. She's in the CSC here,
Okay.
and she's like, I was like, oh, like I didn't even know that I could wear one. Like I was like, genuinely
I
with
see.
with
Right.
the is it ergonomic for me? Is it super heavy? Like can I physically do this job? That was a genuine
Mm.
question that I had because I was like, these cameras are very heavy. They're like you're operating on your feet all the time. So it was nice because I come from the can background, like working out in the gym and health and fitness is still super important. So that definitely helped. Like if I wasn't, lifting weights and stuff, it would be hard. Um, but yeah, being able to see another woman do it, I was like, oh, like, okay, she probably has some answers to questions that I've always had.
Mm.
Um, and yeah, I think there was also a time, I've talked about this in a couple podcasts, but I think this was like maybe 2 or 3 years ago now, where I think it was a university where we were shooting for TEDx. It was like TED
Okay.
Talks, basically. And I
Hmm.
was producing it. And it was like 2 or 3 hours in to this shoot. And I realized that I was the only girl on the set, but I did the hiring. So I was
Interesting.
like, oh, like what? Like it's, it's never, it wasn't
Hmm.
conscious to me up until that point where I was like, oh, like I have the power to make those decisions, but
Sure.
I've been surrounded by guys this whole time. Like my entire filmmaking career, I've been supported and uplifted by men in this industry, and it's been, to be like, in my experience, there's been so much good that has come from that. So it's because I'm, like kind of a minority in that sense. It was kind of eye-opening of like, oh, I could kind of change this because I'm a producer, and even as a DP, you have sometimes
Yeah.
control over who your crew is going to
100%.
be. So, yeah, it's just like something that I now keep in the back of my mind of like it would be nice to have an even balance, but skill set still trumps everything. Like I will die on that hill of like
Yeah,
if
I
if
agree.
there's
I'm in
an
the same boat.
opportunity, yeah, if there's an opportunity for a girl to come on board and learn, sweet.
Hmm.
Just so that the next time maybe she can improve her stuff over time and, get into the position that she wants to get into. But yeah, it's like, yeah, skill set trumps all, but it's like kind of lonely, but it's
Mm.
changing. Like I can totally see it changing and growing, and like I'm pretty sure that's why Lizzie found me on TikTok, was because I was like, I said hashtag female filmmaker or whatever, and it popped up on her page, and she was like,
Yeah.
oh, so let's join forces. But yeah,
It, you kind of remind me, or maybe she reminds me of you in a sense. There's this girl that I've been working with for 2 years. I met her on I Think I'm Sick, the feature.
nice.
And
Which
before
I
coming
still
onto
haven't
the,
seen, and I want to see it so
I
bad.
know. It's playing in London next month and New Jersey next month. And then
Nice.
after that, hopefully it'll be coming out in the next like 2 months, 3 months. We'll see.
Sweet.
I don't know.
Yay.
Can't say. Um, but before coming onto the project, she was on the project because it was her school internship. She was just
Mhm.
like a camera trainee, just there to be a part of the project. And when I came on, I moved her up to second AC. And by just like that simple upgrade a little bit, it changed everything. She was, even to this day, she is one of the best crew members that I have ever worked with in any department. She is like, and I tell her this all the time, how good she actually is. She arrives on set before me, which is crazy because I arrive early.
Yep.
And she is so prepared. She knows, she anticipates things well. And just like that simple action of like empowerment and like lifted her up to really just like blossom. And I've been able to bring her on commercials and other things, and she wants to be shooting. So I mean, I'd love to connect you guys at some point because she's amazing. She
That's
really is.
awesome. Yeah. And it's just like you said, the little like upgrade, it means a lot. Like it's
Right.
huge when someone sees like, oh, you can, you don't have to just PA, or you're not like full entry level. Like let's give you a little more responsibility. And I think,
Right.
I don't know if this applies to like all creatives necessarily, but I feel like there's an underlying sense of ADHD, of
Mm,
just,
mm,
especially in the entrepreneurship realm, where you're like, I want to
sure.
take on so many things and
Yeah.
do all of the things, and creativity flows sometimes with those kind of like neurospicy topics, if you know what I mean.
Right.
Like, so when you give someone, definitely not even saying like she has ADHD, I'm not saying that at all, but in the creative community, if you are maybe just in the observing role, you might not even be as interested to like
Mm,
participate. Whereas if you have many tasks to do, for especially for me, I'm even more excited because I'm like, you know, the
mm.
game Cooking Mama, where you're like, you have 6 pots boiling,
Was that like
and
years? Was that like popular years ago? I
yeah,
think, or is it
like
still
years
popular
and years and
today?
years ago. There's
Okay,
another
all
game
right.
called Overcooked, and it's similar,
I
where
remember
it's
Cooking
like,
Mama. I think I remember that. Wow, you like tapped into a. Let's. What's that other game? The Yogi Mama Yogi. I don't know. Someone said another game like a while ago, and it just like hit like a chord in my brain that I didn't even think was there
just
anymore.
unlocked some memories. But
Yeah.
it's that game was like you have many tasks and you have to do them in order, and you're constantly doing something, and you know that there's 3 or 4 things in the queue that you have to do next. And I find
Mm,
those are the environments where like I would thrive the most, especially as a second, coming from like the DP and going to a second. You don't have as many things to think about, but you still make it your own. Like
right. Yeah.
understand what kind of tasks you have to do and what
Hmm.
you have to keep checking, and that
Right.
sense of anticipation, like that's a huge
Anticipation
thing.
is huge as a second AC. Knowing when a
Yep.
battery needs to be changed, or just anticipating when the first might need something.
Yep.
I think it's also just like the sense of purpose is huge in
Yep.
those roles, and being able to, like what you said, find what those things could be.
Yep.
Yeah, it's
Totally.
amazing.
Yeah.
So you're. I have just a couple more questions, but since you're also doing the content creation side, which is kind of starting to get into the realm of having conversations with brands, you talked about entrepreneurship, and I'm curious as to how you find that balance between being a creative and thinking about business.
Um I love business. I love making
Me too.
money. Like
Me
I'm
too.
I
Me too. Glad we're on the
like
same page.
yeah, like if you love it, obviously you're going to dedicate more time to it. So I have certain things set up that are, I know tons of people don't as creatives, like automatic email replies and like quick messages. If someone messages me on Instagram, "Hey, I want to hire you." I have a quick message that says, like, I just have to type lead or something, or like
Mm,
whatever, and it sends them a message to say, "Hey, fill out this form. Like, thanks so much for reaching out. Please fill out this," like something that I would, you know, take at
sure.
least 5 or 10 seconds to say. When I think business, I just think automation because it's so much work. So the automatic emails, anything that I can just automate on the side, that is all set up. And QuickBooks, that's another thing, like keeping track
Yeah, I
of
love QuickBooks.
expenses and all that. Like that's something that I'm very like proud to have spent time on developing as like a
Hmm.
foundation. And then when things get really busy and chaotic, like I have those are just running in the
You have their
background. So
systems in
I
place for sure.
yeah, so I mean, like do you have a bookkeeper? Like, are you or your own bookkeeper or?
I'm my own bookkeeper to a degree. I have an accountant that I work with pretty regularly to
Yep,
help me. But
yep, me too.
I have some videos that I put out about personal finance, and it's so important understanding, because of freelancers, life is so potentially inconsistent, especially in the
Yep.
beginning. Having systems in place or different bank accounts to be able to put you in a position of like having a safety net is so important.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that I feel like a lot of people are kind of afraid to talk about in the freelance world, is like money. And it's something that
Mm,
I'm never really afraid to talk about because I know how important it is.
yeah. Yeah, the money side of things is um it's just kind of fun. I don't know. Like
Yeah.
even as much as I don't really like math, I like numbers,
I
and
like
like
counting
in
money.
that sense, I like if the numbers mean money, then great. Like I'm
Right.
here for it.
Right.
So, yeah, it's like understanding I guess my goal last year in terms of like finances and business goals was to essentially increase my production value. So, like hiring more crew members and making bigger teams. And in the numbers, you can see it. You can actually see the I always get them mixed up, but like your gross income, it was substantially higher, but my net was the same as like the
Sure.
previous year. So like I knew that so much of that was going to subcontractors and expenses and all that stuff. So now into this year, I'm like, okay, let's get the net higher as well as
Yeah.
the gross,
Yeah.
like that would be nice. But yeah, just understanding those basic concepts, like that will help you so much. If you are I guess like more times than not responsible for people other than yourself, because if you
Right.
are one piece of the puzzle and you're in a union, or you're just in that one role and you're not really hiring other people, it's still important, but it's not like as important as if you're
Mm.
you have a website to maintain, you have clients that expect certain like optics, so like you have to be ready to
True.
be able to hire certain people and appear maybe bigger than you actually are.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's like a
Yeah.
whole fake it till you make it game that I've played since the
Right.
beginning. So
I've played that many times too.
yeah.
Yeah, I remember the first time it was like a $500,000 commercial I was doing. It was like I've never done anything like this before. This was like 2 years ago maybe,
Yeah.
and I had 11 or 12 crew members in G&E, and this was my first time using 18Ks on condors
Yep.
outside, and like on the Scout, I'm like, yeah, this is what we need to do. This is that, and the other thing in my head, I'm like, I hope this works. 'Cause I have no idea. But I had a great team that like behind me that like, understood where I actually was. But
Yep.
to producers and agency people, and you're getting hired as a DP, you do need to put up some sort of like front in terms of confidence to be able to prove that you are the one that's capable to get the job done.
Yep.
There is a
100%.
degree of that for sure.
Yeah.
I got one last question for you. And first off, thanks for the conversation. This has been great so far.
Yeah,
Yeah,
totally. It's been fun. I actually, before you ask this next question, can
sure.
I say one story? It
Of
just reminded
course.
me, there was like speaking of speaking of appearing bigger than what, like optics wise and things like that. Um it was actually the project that I shared on your Discord. This was like shot in it was the biggest, like I won't name specific names. If you were on the Discord and you saw it, you know which one I'm talking about. But this project, similar to you, where you were like, biggest budget I've worked with, like so many crew members, just like, and it was also, in my case, it was for someone I looked up to on like a personal level, where you're like, oh wow,
Mm,
this could be career changing. This is like the
right.
narrative that you have in your head. And I have no idea why they reached out to me. They found me through Instagram, and I totally faked it. I was like, sounds good. Like, I could do this, no problem at all. And to this day, that has been like the best, but equally the worst production ever. And
Mm,
I don't think I shot for 4 or 5 months after that, just because of the true chaos of that whole, oh my God, it was just, I
wow.
probably have to go to therapy for it.
Uh,
It was crazy because, like, I'll just put it into perspective of like, I think it was this was my first time dealing with, I think it was like 70 grand of a budget. And
okay.
they looked at me
Which
as
is a
the
lot.
production
If you've never
company.
done that before, that's a lot.
It was a lot to manage as the
Yeah,
first, one of the first, big things, as,
for
so
sure.
they looked at me as the production company, and I was also going to DP it, which was first mistake. Don't like, I wouldn't, on a spec, great, but to be able to do both, if you have done both and you've done it numerous times and you have a flow, great. But this is the first time where I was like, yeah, I could DP this too. Why did I think that? I don't know. There's certain things where you're like, is this imposter syndrome, or am I actually kidding
Mm,
myself? Like,
sure.
there's a weird
It's a good
balance
point.
there. And so, to put it into perspective, with that 70 grand budget, we had, I think it was like 4 or 5 days of production, and we had maybe 12, or no, I think maybe even 15 crew members. 3 days before production, they
Oh
say,
no.
hey, so this studio space we're shooting in, we can only have 5 people. I'm like,
Interesting.
what do you mean? Like, what do you mean? Yeah, we can only have 5 people. This was around the COVID time because the person we were
Okay.
shooting was like immunocompromised or whatever. And it was also obviously like everyone signed an NDA, so fine. But like it's a more private space. So they were like, yeah, and that also includes client. So I'm like, okay, how many client people do you need in this space?
They're like
They're like,
4.
oh, probably two, probably two. I'm like, so
Yikes.
we've got to shoot this with what did I say, 4 or 5 people? I don't know. It
5
was
people, yeah.
2 client, and it was me, the director, and sound. When I tell you, I've probably gained like 6 years on my life from that shoot. We had our gaffer upstairs outside of the building building the lights, and me and the director would run up the stairs, grab the lights, run them down,
No.
and position them. We
I
had
think I
2
remember
cameras.
did you tell this story in like in that webinar that I had like a year, 2 years ago?
Maybe.
It sounds
Maybe.
familiar.
Yeah. But
Well,
I
that's
just
crazy.
like to wrap it up, speaking about faking it till you make it, be careful when you do that because
Yeah.
yes, you can like there's a whole thing of imposter syndrome and like I totally get it. Appear bigger than you are. Like under promise over deliver is another, saying to go by, but like if you need help, do not be afraid to ask for it because
Sure.
if you really don't know like what you're doing and an opportunity can come sooner than your skill level can meet it, it can mess you up.
Yeah.
And I've learned
That's good
so
advice.
much, but I would love to redo that. And final product looks great. Nobody would know, but like the behind
You
the
know.
scenes, yep. And a lot of
Yeah.
the crew remember that too, because it trickles down if your
Sure.
director's stressed, if your DP's stressed, your whole crew feels it too. So we had to fire a ton of people. Like it was crazy. But anyway, just as a like
Great
little
story. Yeah,
nugget
that
of
was a great
info.
story. Yeah.
Just
A great story, and there was also some great pieces of advice in there.
Yeah.
My last question is, what am I thinking? I guess when you're doing sports media, we'll start there. When you're doing sports media, that version of you that, you at that age, you at that experience is sitting at a table, and across from that version of you is you now. What would you give that younger version of you from where you are sitting now?
like advice on what to say
Sure.
to them.
But, just in general, like, what would you give that version of you that's just starting their career?
Mm, it's I know that everyone hesitates when you ask this question. I
Yeah.
watched a couple of podcasts and everyone was
Yeah.
like, And I think people hesitate because like you don't want to give away too much to this
Right.
younger person. You want them to go through the learning lessons and stuff. You want them to
Hmm.
fail and then recover and so you don't want to like give too much, but mm, I would just say I don't know, like there's you're never going to know everything, but the people around you are going to make it so worth it. Like that is I think the one thing I would say. Like if I had no idea where I would be or like what skill set I'm going to have, like even if I decided to become a gaffer, like I don't know, if my career path changes like within film, it's like truly the people around you that are going to make this so much fun And like spec projects speak for that. Even paid projects where you have phenomenal crew working with you, meeting people like you and like Lizzie, like through social media or whatever, like just
Yeah.
being open to new connections and new relationships with people, like it's the coolest thing. Like we all have this passion for what we do, and we wouldn't be doing it if we didn't like it. Like this is,
Right.
grind. Like it's hours and hours, late nights, like lifting heavy shit. Like you're like this is not like, something that you do for the money necessarily, but it goes back to those like crew vibes. Like when you're on a set and you get into a flow state and people are laughing and making jokes and everything is just going smoothly, and
Right.
you just feel that fulfillment from everyone. Like that's what matters. And like
That's what it's about.
hopefully
Yeah.
in I guess when I look to the future too, commercials sometimes not necessarily have that same like outcome of the final piece because you're selling a product. But I hope that some of the commercials that I work on are maybe like short films or docs or whatever, they have a meaning as well. Like there's intentionality behind the crew that made it, feels good and is fulfilled and finds purpose doing it, but the product will also, show that whatever we're actually creating will also serve a cool purpose and fulfillment to like other people watching it, not just like a cool DoorDash commercial or like
Yeah.
that doesn't tell a story. It's just selling something. I think that's where you would like really get that's like hitting the rainbow thing on Mario Kart. Like you're just like that
I
is the
see. Yeah, that's
coolest
fun.
feeling
That's
when
fun.
you get both. So yeah, that's what
Amazing.
I would say.
Great. That's a great note. I know it's definitely a tough question for people, and a lot of the times, like a lot of people have a similar response as to like, I don't want to give too much advice because some of the hardships that I've went through are kind of what make me who I am.
Yep.
But there's usually an answer people can find within it.
Yeah.
So anyway, thanks for coming on. Where can people find you? Share all of your stuff.
Yeah.
Share your stuff.
Yeah, I guess I do the YouTube thing now. So YouTube
Yes, you
is
do.
just
Share it.
YouTube is just my name, Nicole Shapiro. Instagram's nshaps, and TikTok is nshaps.prod. And TikTok I post pretty much like I'm trying to still post once a day ish. I'm turning down the volume a little bit now just because of the YouTube stuff. But yeah, I'm trying to share lots of tips there. So yeah.
Amazing. I'll link all of that in the description and your Bumble commercial as well.
Cool. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Thank you for coming on. I appreciate you being here.
Thanks for having me. Thanks, guys.
Of course. All right, everyone. Have a great day. Peace out. So thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Creative Gap podcast. Hopefully you enjoyed today's episode, and if you did, there are a ton of other episodes for you to listen to as well. Check us out on Spotify, Google Play, Apple Podcasts, wherever you want to get your podcast, you can find it. And now that you're watching this, you could also watch the full video podcast on YouTube. Also, be sure to check us out on Instagram at Creative Gap for future updates, upcoming guests, and a lot of short clips. For those of you who are new to the show, welcome. Hopefully you enjoy it. And for those of you who have been here for a long time, thank you. So that's all we got for you today. Hopefully you enjoyed the episode. We'll see you next time. Peace out.